Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick Moser. Welcome to my brief introduction to my new book that's coming out this summer with the University of Illinois Press, Waikiki Dreams: How California Appropriated Hawaiian Beach Culture. I have a little bit of a show and tell that I'll do, show you some pictures from the book, and then we will be off and running. So that's the cover. On the left, you see Tom Blake, one of the innovators of California beach culture in the 1920s and 1930s. He was born in the Middle West, Wisconsin, moved to California before he made his way to Hawaii in the late 1920s and then throughout the 30s and 40s. On the right, of course, is Duke Kahanamoku, Olympic gold medal swimmer, 1912 and 1920. They are at Waikiki Beach, and Duke really represents the foundation of California beach culture, as I'll show in a minute. Basically, my main point here that I'm going to make is that I track the appreciation of Hawaiian beach culture that begins really with Duke in the 1920s and 1930s, and how that transforms that fad for all things Hawaiian that Californians had, especially in Southern California, how that appreciation transforms into appropriation through the 1930s and the 1940s. And that really begins with Californians profiting from Native Hawaiian culture and their artifacts. And that process is related to settler colonialism and replacing ultimately Native Hawaiians and controlling their land. So we'll begin here, excuse me, with Duke, a young Duke Kahanamoku. He's probably in his early 20s. This is a picture of him probably at Corona del Mar down in Orange County, right there at the Newport Harbor. And that's an unknown woman. I don't know her identity, but it looks like he's about to give her a surfboard lesson. And Duke really is the foundation, as I said, of California beach culture in the 1920s. So after his gold medal in the 1920 Olympics, he moved to Los Angeles about 1922 or so. And he wanted to star in the Hollywood movies. And he was there throughout the 1920s. And he represents the connection between Hawaiian beach culture, which is to say surfing, swimming, canoeing, just enjoying the beach life and showing all the benefits of being in the ocean. Connecting that culture and that enjoyment to Hollywood. And Hollywood was able to amplify those ideals and really created a big fad in California. And Duke was so talented. He was a celebrity, so charismatic that people wanted to be with him and they wanted to be like him. And really one of the subtexts of my book is that there's this big disconnect between Southern Californians who idealize Native Hawaiians and Native Hawaiian culture, especially beach culture. That disconnect between idealizing the culture and the people, but not really creating substantive relationships with Native Hawaiians themselves. And Duke kind of became their stand-in. He became the guy that they connected with, and they also connected with surfing. So in some ways, he replaced that connection that many of them had for Native Hawaiian culture. Here's Tom Blake, who is on the cover of the book. He is building one of his hollow surfboards. So he started doing that in the late 1920s, 1930 or so. Was living in Hawaii. Those boards are inspired by Native Hawaiian surfboards that he found in the Bishop Museum. So he had this idea to hollow them out, create a lighter board that would also serve not only for surfing, but for life-saving as well. And one of the reasons why Los Angeles became such a big center for surfing is because it was a big manufacturing center, the biggest one in the West. So the raw materials, the factories, the craftsmen, all of them were in Los Angeles. And that allowed surfboards to be built and various things attached to surfing. So car racks, it was a real do-it-yourself period, especially during the Great Depression. So car racks and tires, things for automobiles, surfers had to travel quite a ways in California to reach different breaks. So that's Blake. And he became really influential when this surfboard combined with the life-saving organizations. So here we are, this group of 7 young men, they're all lifeguards out in Santa Monica. They're standing in front of the Casa del Mar, which was one of the big beach clubs in the 1920s. And you can see behind them are all these Tom Blake hollow paddle boards and life-saving boards. So it's really that moment in the early 1930s when Tom Blake's paddle boards, he comes to California and they become manufactured in Los Angeles, and he gets the lifeguard organizations to buy them and to train lifeguards on them. These young men are going to be trained how to save lives on these boards, and they also use them for surfing. So California beach culture really expands out in the 1930s from the lifeguards. So it begins with the lifeguards, surfing and lifeguarding, the 2 pillars of California beach culture, and then expands out to people on the beach and then to the general population. But before the 1930s, early 1930s, you had people who popularized surfing, people like George Freeth, who arrived in 1907, and Charlie Wright, who was in San Diego in the 1920s. And they were charismatic, but as soon as they left, Freeth died and Charlie Wright left to do other things. That momentum in beach culture and surfing especially kind of stalled out. So Duke was charismatic as well, but when individuals could leave and the culture itself continue through these surfboards and the lifeguard organizations, that's when California beach culture really established its foundation and could grow from there. On the far right of that picture is Pete Peterson kind of avoiding the camera, which he liked to do. We'll see another picture of Peterson. He became one of the great influencers and watermen of the 20s and the 1930s, and was going to help expand Hawaiian beach culture in California. So here he is. Over the next 5 slides or so, we'll get an idea of how Hawaiian beach culture became such a fad in California. So here's Pete Peterson. He had gone to Hawaii. He was at Waikiki surfing, saw the Waikiki Beach Boys in their canoes and surfing, and he brought that back to California. So here he is playing Waikiki Beach Boy in the shore break of Santa Monica, probably right out in front of the Casa del Mar, where we saw those lifeguards standing. So there's the outrigger canoe, sort of inspired by Hawaiian outrigger canoe. And they've got their paddles, sort of square paddles. So they don't quite match native Hawaiian culture, but they're trying. And they're having a lot of fun in the summertime, just enjoying the ocean. Here we see, this is a picture of that Doc Ball took of members of the Palos Verdes Surfing Club. So right there at the southern end of Santa Monica Bay, that's Thule Clark standing on a surfboard. He has some abalone on the nose of the board. If you look closely, he's wearing some goggles around his neck. He's been diving. And then there's an outrigger canoe club with several members paddling, trying to catch a wave there at Bluff Cove. Doc Ball had also been to Waikiki, and he liked to frame his photographs with the idea of Waikiki in mind. And I'll give you an idea. This is not a Doc Ball photograph, but I'm sure you've seen photographs like this. So this is Ethel Kukea. She is the sister of Lauren Whitey Harrison, who was a big influencer in the 1930s as well. He lived in Orange County. But you can see the background of this photograph, so many photographs of surfers at Waikiki and of the Beach Boys. The photographer liked to have that background, which is Diamond Head, of course, the way it moves up and then slopes down. The surfers riding towards the beach, smiling, just having a great time. And we can compare this with Doc Ball's photo. So there's the southern end of Bluff Cove, standing in for Diamond Head, the way it slopes down. And then, of course, the Outrigger Canoe Club. In a Hawaiian photograph, you would have Waikiki Beach Boys there, taking in tourists. And then the surfer there standing, who has also been diving. So the Waikiki Beach Boys oftentimes would go fishing or diving for food out there at Waikiki. So we see not only in the content of the pictures, but how they're framed, the influence of Waikiki and of Hawaii and native Hawaiian beach culture. This is a photograph of a parade float for the January 1938 Rose Parade in Pasadena. You can see there's Eleanor Roach dressed like a hula dancer. She's got the leis around her neck. She has the grass skirt, flowers everywhere. That's Marianne Hawkins on the shoulders of a member of the Palos Verdes Surfing Club. They're standing on this surfboard that's covered with flowers as well. Members of the Palos Verdes Surfing Club surrounding them, playing music, guitars, ukulele, dressed as they imagine Native Hawaiians to dress. And that float was called Little Waikiki. So that was to fit in with the theme, the fantasy theme that year. And Little Waikiki was what Doc Ball had called Bluff Cove. That was their moniker for Bluff Cove down in Palos Verdes, because at Bluff Cove, you could get those long rides on your surfboard, just like they did at Waikiki. This is Irene Chauvin dancing the hula. Again, the bikini top, the leis around her neck, around her ankles, around her wrists, the grass skirt, members of the Palos Verdes Surfing Club, some of them surrounding her, a young man with a ukulele, singing Hawaiian songs probably. It's a party at one of the homes of a Palos Verdes Surfing Club member, E.J. Ogier. So this is what they did. They held luau's. They danced hulas. They went surfing. They strummed music on the beach. They were living this lifestyle imitated from the Hawaiian Beach Boys, the Waikiki Beach Boys. 1935, so this is probably late 30s. 1935 was also when the radio program Hawaii Calls started playing in Los Angeles. So people would listen to that, the surfers would listen to that, and they could be directly connected because that radio program played a half hour of traditional Hawaiian music, and they played it most often directly from the shores of Waikiki. So how does all this appreciation and this fad of Hawaiian culture, how does that turn into appropriation? We see it a little bit in this photograph. This is 1935 in the summer. Of course, that's Shirley Temple down there. She is being inducted as the honorary captain of the Waikiki Beach Patrol. And if you look down there, you even see a little pint-sized surfboard that says, "Aloha, Captain Shirley." Those are the Waikiki Beach Boys there. But those surfboards are not Hawaiian surfboards. In fact, those surfboards were made in Los Angeles. This picture has everything that Californians and Americans loved about Waikiki. It's got Diamond Head there in the background. It has the palm trees. You've got the sandy beach and the umbrellas in the back. You have the Waikiki Beach Boys. You have surfing. And so who made those surfboards? They actually were made in Los Angeles by this man. This is Meyer's buddy and his wife, Elizabeth. This is on a beach in Southern California, probably in the late 1920s. So Meyer's buddy was the son of a man who started Pacific System Homes. This was the largest ready-made home builders in the world in the 1920s. So Myers asked his father, he had this idea in the late 1920s, let's start building surfboards. And that's what they did. They created a separate division. They had the workers there, they had the wood, they had the know-how. So they started building these surfboards. And we'll go back to the Shirley Temple. You can see this board, the way the stripes are, matches those three boards on the left-hand side. Those are the early model Pacific System homes, probably a combination of pine or balsa and redwood strips. The later models you can see are on the right here. They've got redwood around the nose, along the sides, and along the tail block, just to protect them, because balsa and pine are soft woods. They would ding easily, and redwood would give them a little bit more protection. So the appropriation begins when you have a Los Angeles-based wood company building surfboards that are supposedly authentic. They even had, they call them Hawaiian surfboards. So they call them Hawaiian surfboards. They're made in Los Angeles. They're shipped to Waikiki. And Pacific System Homes, those boards became the official surfboard of the Outrigger Canoe Club. So you have these iconic Hawaiian clubs and people, the Outrigger Canoe Club, the Waikiki Beach Boys themselves, which really embodied the native Hawaiian ideal of the waterman, of the surfer, of the swimmer, of somebody who could dive and who could paddle a canoe. So Californians idealize these men. And so you have basically California companies, and those outfits were made by Jansen. It was based in Portland, Oregon. So their outfits, their surfboards, even with their Hawaiian names on there, you see Pua Kealoha there. He's got his board with his name on it. Chick Daniels has his board with his name on it. You wouldn't know necessarily that these boards were made in California by a California company. Other California businesses that appropriated Hawaiian beach culture, Matson Steam Lines, they owned the ships that took the tourists to Waikiki. Matson also owned the two major hotels, the Moana and the Surfrider. So they owned the hotels, the shipping, connected with the Waikiki Beach Boys, built their surfboards, sent them their clothing. So all of these California businesses are profiting from native Hawaiian beach culture, essentially. And who were they selling this to? Well, you have these California or West Coast businesses selling Hawaiian ideals and supposedly authentic Hawaiian products to other Californians, because Californians made up the majority of the tourists at Waikiki. More than half of all tourists that came in on the Matson lines came from California. So we'll continue this with my last slide, how this appropriation of beach culture turns into what is related to settler colonialism and the erasure of Native Hawaiians themselves and the taking of their land. So we're back where we began. This is the photograph that the cover of the book is based on. That's Tom Blake on the left and Duke Kahanamoku on the right, with one of Tom Blake's hollow paddleboards. On the left is Tom Blake's book that he published, wrote and published in 1935, Hawaiian Surfboard. In that book, Tom Blake invents this Native Hawaiian myth that is based on himself and his own experiences. So essentially, he inserts himself into the legendary genealogy of the kahuna, of the Native Hawaiian board builders, and establishes himself, gives himself a Hawaiian name, bases the events of this legend on his own experiences, and sets himself as the heir apparent to these kahuna, and in the same line as Duke Kahanamoku, whom he actually idolized. He becomes sort of this self-appointed heir apparent to Duke. And by giving himself a Hawaiian name and inventing this legend, inserting himself into Hawaiian legendary history, he is replacing Native Hawaiians. And he is essentially erasing them from history. So that's basically how the appreciation becomes appropriation and connects to the erasure of Native Hawaiian culture. And we can't forget what's happening on the larger stage at this time, which is the slow progress of the United States taking over the Hawaiian Islands, established it as a territory in 1898, after the takeover in 1893, aided by US Marines, and then finally in 1959, of course, where Hawaii becomes the 50th state. So this process of the fad of Native Hawaiian culture, the appreciation that all of these surfers in the 20s and 30s and through the 40s showed for Native Hawaiians, but they never really established those relationships with Native Hawaiians themselves. Duke became that stand-in. And then these surfers were part of that process, the slow process of settler colonialism and the erasure of the Native Hawaiians. So that's my brief introduction to Waikiki Dreams, how California appropriated Hawaiian beach culture. Thanks so much for listening.